A Chicago police officer was found not guilty this week in the off-duty shooting of 22-year-old Rekia Boyd in 2012. But wait until you find out why he was found not guilty. Now, the details of the actual shooting are a little bit sketchy. We do know that he was off-duty, that he was in his vehicle shooting over his shoulder at a group of teens having some sort of confrontation in an alleyway. When he thought he saw a gun being held, it was in fact actually a cell phone. And he fired and killed Rekia Boyd. Now, the judge has found him not guilty. Now listen to this explanation of why. The act of intentionally firing a gun at some person or persons on the street is an act that is so dangerous it is beyond reckless. It is intentional, and the crime, if any there be, is first-degree murder. So the fact that he was charged with involuntary manslaughter, it was not a strong enough charge. So he's now been found not guilty, and thanks to the rules on double jeopardy we have, he might well escape any sort of actual criminal penalties simply because they went too light with their initial charge. Now, I don't know what the thinking of the judge is beyond that, but it seems like if what you actually wanted was a stronger penalty, enforcing no penalty is an odd direction to go in.
Yeah.
And just to define for you, if you're not familiar with double jeopardy, it's the procedural defense that forbids a defendant from being tried again on the same or similar charges following a legitimate acquittal or conviction. Now, there is the possibility of civil penalties. I suppose there's a possibility of perhaps some sort of federal investigation. But understand that Servin, the police officer in question here, was the first Chicago police officer in more than 15 years to be charged in a fatal shooting. Now, he continues the streak of them not actually being found guilty in a fatal shooting, but at least he was charged. So I guess that's some amount of justice there.
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy legal precedent that the loophole, it sounds like, that if you don't charge the police officer under the right kind of charge, that the judge will dismiss it. And I would love to look into more lawsuits, or I'm sorry, more cases like this, where the prosecution did not go with the right kind of charge and the judge dismisses it. If this is something that is normal, because this is a new one for me. I haven't quite heard of this particular one. So, you know, is it that this particular judge has a preference for letting cops off the hook for these kinds of
or he's trying to make a statement in some way.
You know, possibly. And so I don't know enough about this particular case to be able to say that, but it does bring that question up for me about whether or not this is a really legitimate way to completely dismiss a case against a police officer, or if it's just some other something else going on that, hey, you know, this happens all the time and prosecutors really drop the ball on this case. You know, that could also be. But looking at the details of I'm not surprised that folks are shocked by this particular ruling. You know, basically, the details that I have read about on this particular case, that apparently, you know, there are a group of teenagers who left a party, and Servin, the police officer who killed Rekia Boyd, that he had made what was essentially a noise complaint, saying, you know, there are too many people at this party. And then when this group of teenagers was leaving down the alleyway facing away from him, that's when he shot them because he felt threatened. You know, and I think this is another
incredibly reckless
of the stand your ground laws. You know, that if you can just say, "Hey, I felt threatened, man," you know, and as
we had a long string of those. in the South.
As long as you kill your victim, then there's really nobody that can actually step up and say, "No, it wasn't like that at all."
Yeah.
So.
And the ironic thing is, if he had actually been convicted of involuntary manslaughter, we probably would have covered it as, this is injustice. That is clearly not involuntary manslaughter. You don't fire your gun into a crowded alleyway and, oh, somebody was hit by it, as if that wasn't your intention. But getting nothing is far worse. And the prosecutors are in a very tough situation. They're really between a rock and a hard place, where it's almost impossible to even charge a police officer, let alone convict them. So there's the temptation to go for a lesser charge, but now if you go for the lesser charge, it might be voided because you didn't go strong enough. So if you're a prosecutor, I have no idea what you're supposed to do coming out of this. How are you supposed to get any justice?
How are you supposed to respond? And, you know, just to note one other thing, that this was, that the gun that Servin shot Rekia Boyd with was an unregistered semi-automatic handgun, so I'm kind of surprised that there wasn't really, it seems, any kind of punishment for carrying
Maybe we can have some kind of charge for that in the future.
Yeah, and we should also note that there was a $4.5 million settlement that the city of Chicago did pay to resolve a civil lawsuit by Boyd's family, but I don't think that prevents Boyd's family from suing the police officer individually.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that includes that.